After my husband's funeral, my son said, "Thank God he passed away. Now we can finally get rid of you, old woman." Then he left me standing alone on the side of the road, just like that, as if I were nothing more than a bag of trash someone forgot to take out. I didn't cry, I didn't beg, I didn't even speak. I just stood there, still holding my handbag and the little framed photo of my husband I had brought from the house. There were muddy footprints all over my skirt, left from when Marcus shoved me away from the family car. The last thing he said before slamming the door was, "This isn't your life anymore." He drove off with his wife, Lindsay, and my 2 grandsons, both of whom didn't even glance back at me. The wind picked up as I sat down slowly on the edge of the curb, right next to the cemetery fence. I didn't have my phone on me because Lindsay had taken it earlier, saying she needed to manage calls during the service. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. A kind groundskeeper saw me and asked if I was all right. I told him I just needed to make one phone call. He handed me his cell. I dialed a number I hadn't used in years. "David?" I said when the voice on the other end answered. There was a long pause. "Is this Margaret?" "Yes. I wondered when I'd hear from you again." "I'm ready." "All right," he said, calm as always. "Come by the office in the morning. Bring your copy of the trust. We'll make it official." I thanked him and handed the phone back to the man who had helped me. Then I sat there for a moment longer before calling a cab with the little cash I had tucked into my coat pocket. That night, I slept in a cheap motel just outside of town. I didn't go home. Marcus had taken my house key from me months ago, saying it was for security reasons. I didn't argue, not then, but now everything was different. Because what Marcus didn't know was that his father, my late husband, Henry, never trusted him. Not completely. Henry and I were married for 43 years. We were not a perfect couple, but we understood one another. Henry ran the family lumber business, and I handled the household, the books, the logistics, the calls, and most of the employees' paperwork. I knew every supplier, every invoice, and every retirement plan under that company's name. Marcus was our only child, and to Henry's disappointment, he had no interest in the business. He had big dreams, finance, marketing, maybe consulting, but no backbone for any of it. He always said he was destined for bigger things, and left the town right after college. He came back 5 years later with a wife, no job, and a mountain of debt from a failed online venture. Henry gave him a position at the company, managing warehouse logistics. He stayed just long enough to learn how to write invoices, then quietly convinced Henry to name him as successor, just in case anything ever happened. I still remember the day I caught them talking about it. "I'm just trying to secure the family's future," Marcus had said. Henry didn't respond. He just looked at me. That night, Henry and I sat quietly in the kitchen. "He doesn't understand," Henry finally said. "He thinks this is just about assets. But I'm not leaving the company to him, not the way he wants." That was the same night Henry asked me if I'd ever consider setting up a trust. "Something separate, something just for me, in case things go sideways," he had said. I didn't ask why. I just nodded and told him I'd call David, our old estate attorney, first thing in the morning. Henry passed 3 years after that conversation. Cancer, quick and cruel. I watched him get weaker each week. And through it all, Marcus became more and more present, always checking in, always offering to help with the financial side. He even had Lindsay start organizing the funeral long before the doctors had finished giving us options. I kept quiet. I played the part of the tired old mother, confused and overwhelmed. The truth was, I had every document in place. The morning after the funeral, I walked into David's office with the trust paperwork, as instructed. His assistant looked surprised to see me. "Mrs. Adler," she said, "I didn't know you were coming in today." "I didn't either," I said, placing my hands on the folder, but my situation changed quickly. David came out from his office. His hair had gone completely gray since I last saw him, but his voice was just as calm. "You kept everything exactly as we set it up," he said, flipping through the binder. "Of course I did," I answered. "I wasn't going to let my son bulldoze through everything Henry and I worked for." He smiled gently. "Well, then, let's talk about what you want to do next." The first thing I did was change the access on the company's financial accounts. Technically, Marcus had power of attorney for Henry's health decisions, not his business holdings. Henry had transferred majority control of the company into the trust with me as the sole trustee. Marcus never bothered to check the updated articles of incorporation. He assumed Henry had left the business in his name. But Henry hadn't. Henry left it to me. The cars, the house, the business, the retirement funds, all in the trust, all protected. David made the calls. The bank accounts were frozen. Access to the company cards was revoked. I had new paperwork filed with the county. The company headquarters, the building Marcus had tried to sell 6 months earlier, was now formally part of the Adler Trust. I didn't tell Marcus anything. I didn't need to, but he found out anyway. 3 days later, I received a knock at my motel door. A man in a company uniform handed me a manila envelope. Inside was a letter, scribbled in Marcus's messy handwriting. "What the hell are you doing, Mom? You can't do this. You're not mentally stable. I'm going to contest everything. You need to step aside before this gets ugly." I folded the letter calmly and slipped it into the trash. Then I picked up the phone and called David again. "Let's go ahead and file the asset control notifications," I said. He paused. "Are you sure?" "Yes. He's trying to take what doesn't belong to him." "Understood," David replied. "I'll handle it." That afternoon, Marcus received notice that his company access had been suspended, his keycard deactivated, and his company phone disconnected. The next day, a locksmith changed the locks on the main office. 2 days later, the house door locks were replaced as well. I was in control now, and this time, I wasn't giving it up. Marcus hadn't called me in 3 days. That silence alone said everything. It wasn't just rage, it was disbelief. For once, I had done something he hadn't anticipated. Something he couldn't undo with a dramatic outburst or a guilt trip. But I knew my son, and I knew that silence never lasted long. On the morning of the 4th day, I received an email. The subject line read, "Unauthorized actions." The body of the message was short. "You have 48 hours to reverse this, or I'll have you declared incompetent. This isn't over." Marcus Adler. I stared at the message for several seconds before forwarding it to David with a simple note. "Please advise." David called within the hour. "We've dealt with worse," he said, his tone steady. "You're of sound mind, your documentation is airtight, and the trust gives you complete authority." He's bluffing. Still, David recommended I begin an official inventory of the trust assets, a move that would seal everything legally and leave no room for Marcus to argue misuse or mental decline. That afternoon, I walked into the main office of Adler Lumber for the first time since Henry's death. The receptionist, Julie, did a double take. "Mrs. Adler," she asked, "I didn't know you were coming in. I'm here to review the trust property. Please gather the office keys, internal ledgers, and lockbox access codes." Julie hesitated but complied. She had worked for Henry for over 15 years. She knew better than to question that tone. I walked past the framed photo of Henry in the lobby. He looked so calm in that picture, strong, but never smug. His presence was everywhere. The smell of wood shavings, the way the chairs in the conference room still squeaked because he refused to replace them, and the scuff marks on the floor where he used to pace during heated calls. In his private office, I opened the cabinet where he kept the safe. The combination hadn't changed. Inside were the original copies of the trust, 2 sets of keys, a USB drive labeled, "For Margaret Only," and a small velvet pouch. I didn't open the pouch right away. I waited until I was back in my motel room that night. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was his wedding ring and a handwritten note. "Don't let him turn this into something it's not. You earned everything in here. You held this together. Use it well." Ash. I held the ring in my hand for a long time. I didn't cry. I wasn't even angry. I just felt steady, like I knew exactly what I needed to do. The next morning, David and I met at the county clerk's office to file the official asset inventory under the Adler Family Trust. The stack of documents was thick. Property deeds, vehicle titles, business assets, financial portfolios, all of it, tens of thousands of hours of Henry's work, was now shielded from Marcus's reach. "Once this is filed," David reminded me, "any challenge from Marcus will have to go through the court. And with this level of documentation, he'll have nothing to stand on." I nodded. "Let him try." Marcus didn't wait long. That Friday, I received a formal notice, petition to review trustee capacity, submitted to family court. In short, he was accusing me of cognitive decline, coercion, and financial mismanagement, an effort to paint me as senile and easily manipulated. David prepared our response. I submitted medical records, letters from my doctors, and a psychological evaluation I had scheduled that very week, just to be thorough. "Are you sure you're up for a hearing?" David asked. "I'm more than up for it," I replied. "I've spent 2 years pretending I didn't see what Marcus was turning into. That was the mistake. I'm done pretending. I arrived at the courthouse wearing the same dark blue suit I wore to Henry's memorial. I walked slowly, not because I was weak, but because I wanted Marcus to see that I was in control of my pace, my presence, and my power. He was already in the courtroom when I entered. Lindsay sat next to him in a beige blouse that probably cost more than my entire outfit. Her lips curled the moment she saw me, like she was watching a child walking into traffic. I didn't acknowledge either of them. Instead, I sat beside David, took out my notebook, and uncapped my pen. The judge, a woman in her 60s, sharp eyes behind silver frames, opened the session with formalities. Marcus's lawyer began with all the usual theatrics. Your Honor, we have growing concerns about Mrs. Adler's mental acuity and emotional state following her husband's passing. There is evidence suggesting erratic decision-making, including the abrupt removal of her son from the company he helped build. I didn't react. I didn't even blink. But I wrote 3 words in my notebook in big block letters: he helped destroy. David stood when it was our turn. His voice was steady, measured. He presented the trust, the medical letters, the financial records, and a detailed timeline of Marcus's recent attempts to sell company property without trustee approval. Then I was asked to speak. The courtroom fell silent. I stood up slowly, turned to the judge, and said, I am Margaret Adler. I've managed the books, the taxes, the payroll, and the daily operations of Adler Lumber for over 30 years. I am not confused, not erratic, and not grieving in a way that makes me unfit. I am enforcing the legal documents my husband and I created together, not in grief, but in clarity. There was a short pause before the judge looked at Marcus's attorney. Do you wish to cross-examine the trustee? He whispered with Marcus. Then he stood. We'll be withdrawing the petition, Your Honor. Outside the courtroom, Marcus caught up with me in the hallway. You think you've won? He hissed. This won't last. You're old. Eventually, someone else will run that company. You think you'll take it to your grave? I looked him straight in the eye. I won't need to, I said, because by the time I'm gone, you'll be long out of options. He tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. You know what your problem is? He spat. You've always thought you were smarter than me. No, I said calmly. I just knew I'd outlast your tantrum. And then I walked away. That night, I returned to the office alone. I sat in Henry's chair and looked around at the walls lined with photographs. One of them caught my eye. It was an old company holiday photo. Marcus was in it, years younger, actually smiling. I took it down and placed it in a drawer. Then I opened the envelope marked, for Margaret only, from the safe and inserted the USB drive into Henry's old laptop. Inside were dozens of files, scanned receipts, private letters, audio memos. One folder was named Contingency, Marcus. I clicked it. The first file was a recording. Henry's voice came through, steady and low. If you're listening to this, Maggie, it means Marcus pushed too far. I know you've tried to give him chances, but if he ever threatens what we built, the business, the house, your peace, then everything in this folder becomes your shield. Use it. You don't owe him anything he hasn't earned. I didn't know what was more shocking, the content or the calm finality in Henry's voice. And I hadn't even opened the rest of the files yet, but I would, one by one. I sat there for a long time, staring at the folder on the laptop screen. Contingency, Marcus. Henry's voice still echoed in my ears. It wasn't the voice of a desperate man or a fearful husband. It was the voice of someone who knew exactly what was coming. Henry had always known that Marcus could not be trusted, not fully. He'd hoped his son would grow up, find a sense of responsibility, but in the end, he saw the truth before I did. I had always defended Marcus, even when I shouldn't have. Henry didn't fight me on it, but now, in this folder, I saw just how seriously he had taken the risk. I opened the first document. It was a scanned letter from Henry, notarized, dated nearly a year before his diagnosis. To whom it may concern, I, Henry Adler, am of sound mind and body, and this letter serves as a formal statement. In the event that my son, Marcus Adler, attempts to seize control of Adler Lumber Company by means of coercion, false legal claims, or manipulation of my wife, Margaret Adler, I have enclosed proof of previous misconduct that would legally and ethically disqualify him from any future ownership or managerial control. I kept reading. There were spreadsheets with transaction records, personal withdrawals Marcus had made from company accounts without authorization. Not just small expenses, large ones. A $22,000 charge labeled consulting fee that had gone directly to an account in Lindsay's name. Another $15,000 to a company that didn't exist anymore. But I remembered the name. It was some failed venture Marcus had pitched as a tech upgrade initiative. There were emails too, forwarded from Henry's old inbox. In one of them, Marcus had written to a friend, Once Dad's gone, it'll all be mine anyway. I'm just speeding up the process. It made my skin crawl, but the final file was the most damaging. A voice memo from Henry, timestamped just 6 months before he passed. Marcus came by today, tried to get me to sign over the deed to the property on Route 12, said it was for restructuring purposes. When I refused, he got angry, said I was being unreasonable. Lindsay stood there like a statue, no emotion. They're up to something. I'm moving the rest of the assets tomorrow. If anything happens to me suddenly, check this drive. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat up on the edge of the bed in the motel, the soft buzz of the mini fridge the only sound in the room. My thoughts weren't racing. They were organized, calculated, focused. For the first time, I had leverage, real, irrefutable evidence of Marcus's misconduct. I called David first thing in the morning. I need to initiate a protection clause on the trust, I said. David didn't hesitate. Send me the files. I'll begin the process immediately. And I want him removed from any remaining advisory roles. Anywhere his name appears as an informal, consultant, or strategic advisor, I want it revoked. Understood, David said. By noon, I was sitting across from the internal compliance officer at the bank that handled Adler Lumber's corporate finances. The woman, a no-nonsense type in her late 40s named Deborah Green, skimmed the printed documents and paused when she reached the email from Marcus to his friend. She looked up at me. Do you want to press formal charges? Not yet, I said, but I want his access suspended immediately. If he tries anything, I want it to trigger an alert. Deborah nodded. We can flag his social security number. Any financial movement on company-linked accounts will be traced. And I want all passwords changed, I added. Everything, building access, banking, vendor accounts, all of it. It took 3 hours, but by the time I left that office, Marcus no longer had any fingers in the company. Lindsay, who had tried to act like some kind of shadow partner, was also removed. She wasn't even listed as an employee, but she had login credentials. That alone said enough. Marcus found out that same night. I was sitting in the motel lobby drinking coffee from one of those awful plastic lids when my phone vibrated. It was a video message from Marcus. I hesitated before opening it. When I did, it was a shaky front camera recording. He was standing in front of the Adler Lumber sign outside the building. You think this is over? He hissed. You want to destroy me? You think I won't fight back? You're playing a game you can't win, Mom. He ended it by flipping off the camera and yelling, "You'll regret this." I didn't reply. I didn't even watch the video twice. Instead, I forwarded it to David. We were building a record, and Marcus was too arrogant to realize he was handing me ammunition. The next day, I finally did something I had been putting off. I visited my old house. Technically, it was still Marcus and Lindsay's current residence, or so they thought. The house was listed under the Adler Family Trust, and the lease agreement had expired months ago. They had never paid rent, of course. They just assumed it would always be theirs. I arrived with the locksmith and a police escort, just in case. Lindsay wasn't home, but Marcus was. When he opened the door and saw me standing on the porch, flanked by a police officer and a locksmith, his face twisted into something that looked half amusement, half panic. "You're trespassing," he said. "No," I replied, handing him a copy of the document. "You are. This lease is void. You've been notified by certified mail. As of today, you're no longer authorized to reside here." "You can't be serious," he said, grabbing the papers, flipping through them. "I am. You have 24 hours to vacate. After that, everything left inside will be considered abandoned property." He started to argue, but the officer stepped in. "Sir, she has the right. This is a civil matter, but the documentation is valid. If you don't leave by tomorrow, she can file for eviction." I looked around the house one last time. The couch I had picked out, the rug I had cleaned a dozen times, the photographs still on the wall, none of me. "I suggest you start packing," I said, and I walked out. That night, I didn't return to the motel. I booked a short-term rental on the other side of town, somewhere clean, quiet, neutral. The next morning, David called with an update. "We've completed the security audit on the business accounts. Everything's been sealed. Marcus has no access to anything." "And the file?" I asked. "I'm holding on to it for now," he said. "But I think you should consider your next move carefully. This goes beyond family now. This is about liability and public image." "I'm not trying to embarrass him," I replied. "I just want peace." David paused, then said, "Then let me offer a suggestion." He outlined a plan, one that didn't involve court, one that wouldn't make headlines, but one that would guarantee Marcus never came near the business or the trust again, and it involved an agreement, a legally binding one. "If he signs it," David said, "he forfeits all current and future claims. In exchange, we offer a small severance, nothing substantial, but enough to get him out of your life permanently." I considered it. I hated the idea of giving Marcus anything, but I hated the idea of ever seeing his name on company records again even more. Draft it, I told him. The offer was delivered to Marcus via courier. He didn't reply for 2 days. On the 3rd day, he called. You win, he said. You want me gone? Fine, but I want $50,000. No. You get 10, you walk away, you shut up, and you never come back. He laughed bitterly. 10 grand? After everything I've done for this company. You mean after everything you stole? I asked. The documents are timestamped. You want to go to court? Silence. Fine, he muttered. Send the paperwork. I already did. 2 weeks later, Marcus signed the agreement. David sent me a copy, and I read every line. Termination of claim, forfeiture of interest, waiver of legal action, permanent disassociation from the Adler Family Trust and Adler Lumber Company. I signed it. The bank issued the transfer, $10,000. No more, no less. And just like that, Marcus Adler, my only son, was out. He didn't call. He didn't show up. He didn't even yell. It was over, at least, for now. Marcus was out of the company, out of the trust, out of the house. The agreement had been signed, wired, and filed. His name had been wiped from everything that mattered. On paper, he didn't exist in my world anymore, and for the first time in a long time, there were no new threats, no dramatic phone calls, no legal petitions. But that silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like a fuse had been lit somewhere out of sight, burning quietly, waiting for the next explosion. I spent the first week after his official removal doing what I should have done months ago, checking every corner of the business for damage. I started with the financials. I met with the company accountant, a quiet man named Neil who had worked with Henry for over a decade. He looked tired, not physically, but like someone who had been holding back for a long time. Mrs. Adler, he said as we sat down in the old back office, can I be honest with you now? You can always be honest, I replied. He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were records of irregular expenses, some dating back almost 4 years. He started small, Neil said. Little reimbursements, gas charges, meals. But then he got bold. Event tickets, electronics, unexplained consulting payments. I flagged a few, but your husband was still in control then, and after he passed, Marcus just took over. I didn't know who to report it to anymore. I nodded slowly. You did the right thing by keeping track. He hesitated. Why didn't you stop him sooner? I tried to believe in my son, I answered. That was the mistake. I spent the next several days meeting with every department, warehouse, logistics, sales, HR. One by one, I listened to what the staff had been too afraid to say while Marcus was around. Stories came out in pieces. How he threatened to fire 2 junior staff members for questioning a sudden inventory reduction. How he canceled a vendor contract mid-month because the supplier refused to pay him a personal referral bonus. How Lindsay showed up at the office more than once, giving orders, even though she was never employed there. The anger wasn't loud. It was quiet, tired, suppressed. And that told me something even more important. The people working for us, for me now, hadn't lost faith in the business. They had just lost faith in its direction. We thought maybe you didn't know, one of the office managers told me, that you were grieving, and that's why Marcus was calling the shots. I did know, I said. I just didn't realize how deep the rot went. That weekend, I sat in the den of my temporary rental and started something Henry and I had once talked about but never followed through on, an internal code of ethics for Adler Lumber. It wasn't a symbolic gesture, it was a statement of control. Every employee would sign it, every vendor would agree to it, every financial decision above a certain threshold would require oversight. No more handshakes behind closed doors, no more favors, no more sons taking shortcuts because they share a last name. The draft took 2 days. I emailed it to David for legal review, and he called the next morning. This is strong, he said. Clean, enforceable, and fair. You're rebuilding properly. That's the idea, I replied. The following Monday, I returned to the office to distribute the first round of changes. I expected resistance, maybe even some hesitation, but to my surprise, most of the staff seemed relieved. One of the younger clerks approached me in the hallway and said, "Thank you, we've been holding our breath for 2 years. I paused. That long? She nodded. Since Henry got sick, everything changed, but no one knew what we were allowed to say. That night, I sat in Henry's old office again. The same squeaky chair, the same wooden desk, the same brass lamp. I looked at the framed family photo still sitting near the edge. Henry, me, Marcus, taken years ago during some forced Christmas gathering. I picked it up, opened the frame, and slid the photo out. I didn't tear it. I didn't throw it away. I just placed it in the bottom drawer and closed it. That part of my life was over. But I had forgotten about Lindsay. She hadn't signed anything. She hadn't agreed to disappear, and she didn't plan to. The first sign came 3 weeks after Marcus signed the agreement. A certified letter from her attorney landed on my desk. Inside, the letter stated, "Our client, Mrs. Lindsay Adler, believes she is entitled to a portion of the Adler family trust assets, given her long-standing involvement with family property and contribution to the operational support of Adler Lumber." It was absurd. She had no legal standing. She had never been an employee. She had no documented contributions. But she knew what she was doing. She wasn't trying to win. She was trying to be a thorn. A loud, persistent, expensive thorn. I called David. He read the letter and sighed. "She's trying to leverage noise, hoping you'll offer a settlement just to shut her up." "And what if we don't?" I asked. "Then she'll escalate, threaten press, make a public claim, maybe try to contact employees. Could get messy, but still legally empty." I didn't want noise, but I wasn't going to be blackmailed either. "I'm not paying her a dime," I said. "Draft a formal rejection and notify her attorney that any future harassment will be grounds for civil litigation." He did exactly that, and for a few days, I thought it would end there. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from Julie, our front desk receptionist. "Mrs. Adler," she said, sounding nervous. "Lindsay just showed up at the office." I was in the middle of reviewing vendor contracts in the conference room. I closed the folder calmly and walked out to the front lobby. Lindsay stood near the entrance, arms crossed, in a bright red jacket, holding her phone as if waiting for someone to film something dramatic. "You're trespassing," I said evenly. "This is private property." She smiled, that rehearsed, condescending expression she always wore when trying to manipulate people. "I just came to collect a few things Marcus left behind," she said. "Old files, his laptop, personal effects." "There's nothing here for you," I replied, "and unless you want to leave in handcuffs, I suggest you go now." She didn't move. "You think you've won, Margaret, but everyone knows what kind of woman you are. Then they'll understand why the police are about to escort you out." I nodded at Julie, who had already dialed security. As Lindsay turned to leave, she leaned close and whispered, "You can erase Marcus from the papers, but you'll never erase what people think of you." I didn't respond. I just watched her leave. Because it didn't matter what people thought. It mattered what I controlled. And now, I controlled everything. That night, I added one more item to the company handbook. No non-staff are allowed beyond the reception area without written authorization. No exceptions. The next morning, I came in early and posted it on the wall myself. And for the first time in years, the building felt like it belonged to someone who cared about it again. To me, for the next few weeks, things felt still. Not peaceful, but still. I went to the office early. I reviewed shipments. I met with vendors. I walked through the lumber yard every Friday like Henry used to. Staff morale was improving. Orders were steady. For the first time since my husband's death, the company had structure again. Then I received a phone call from one of our suppliers. "Hi, Margaret," he said, in a careful voice. "Just wanted to confirm something. We got a call from Marcus yesterday. He said he's still involved in purchasing decisions and asked to reinstate some previous credit terms." I stood in silence for a moment. "Did he sign anything? Place any orders?" "No," the supplier answered quickly. "We thought something was off. That's why I'm calling you directly." I thanked him and hung up. My hands were cold. Marcus had no access, no legal rights, no stake, but he still had his name, and he was trying to use it. I called David. "He's baiting you," he said. "He's violating the severance agreement. There's a clause that prohibits misrepresentation of affiliation. So what do? We serve him notice, formally. Then, if he keeps pushing, we take it to court." I drafted a letter the same day and sent it certified mail. David also emailed a digital version directly to Marcus's personal address. The language was clear. "You are no longer affiliated in any capacity with Adler Lumber Company or the Adler Family Trust. Continued misrepresentation will result in legal action." I didn't hear anything back. Not that day, not the next. Then came the fire inspection. It was routine. The department showed up on a Wednesday morning, clipboard in hand. But something felt different. The inspector wasn't the usual one. He introduced himself as Mr. Carver. Polite, thorough, but strangely focused on details that hadn't been a problem in years. He flagged 3 items, 2 minor, 1 major. The major one was an old electrical panel in the warehouse that had passed every inspection before but was now labeled non-compliant. "New county guidelines," he explained. "It'll need to be replaced within 15 days, or we shut down operations in this area." I nodded and signed the report. As soon as he left, I walked straight to the office and pulled out last year's inspection results. That same panel had been reviewed, noted, and marked acceptable. The timing was too perfect, too deliberate. I called David again. "Do you think Marcus had anything to do with this?" I asked. "If he knows anyone inside the department, or if he's pushing through back channels, it's possible," David said. "But we can't prove that unless we get something in writing." I decided not to fight it directly. Not yet. I ordered the panel replacement immediately, paid the full invoice up front, and I documented every interaction, every receipt, every phone call. I wasn't going to give Marcus the satisfaction of catching me off guard again. That weekend, I received an anonymous envelope at the office. No return address, no postmark, just a plain manila envelope with my name typed on a white label. Inside was a stack of papers. The first was a printed screenshot of a social media post from an account I didn't recognize, but the photo was of my house, the one Marcus had been evicted from, with a caption that read, "Some people build legacies, others steal them." The next few pages were screenshots of posts, comments, and messages, all anonymous, all suggesting that I had manipulated Henry into rewriting the trust, that I had isolated him in his final years, that I had orchestrated everything. Lies, but carefully worded ones. No names, no outright accusations, just enough poison to raise doubt. I stared at the papers for a long time. This wasn't a legal attack. It was character damage. I called David and read him some of the messages. "Defamation?" I asked. "Not quite," he replied. "It's close. But unless he names you directly or publishes it under his name, it's protected speech. Still, we can respond if it escalates." "I don't want to respond," I said. "I want to make sure he doesn't get traction. Then we'll control the narrative," David said. "You're the legal owner of the business. Your name is on every filing, every contract, every meeting. You just need to keep moving forward. Let him show the world who he really is." That Monday, I called an all-hands meeting at the company. I kept it short, direct. "There have been rumors," I said. "False ones. If any of you have concerns, my door is open. I have nothing to hide. Henry and I built this company together. What's been happening here, the changes, the structure, the recovery, are all part of honoring that work." Nobody spoke, nobody got up, and nobody left. After the meeting, a few employees came to my office, just to check in. One of the drivers, a man named Don who had been with us since the beginning, said quietly, "Don't worry, Mrs. Adler. We've seen what Marcus did. We're glad you're the one running things." But Marcus wasn't finished. A week later, we received a visit from a county labor auditor. Random, they said. Routine, they said. But I knew better. They asked for payroll records, hiring practices, safety reports. I provided everything. Clean, organized, compliant. I asked the auditor, a younger woman named Ellen, whether someone had triggered this. She paused, then said, carefully, "I can't comment on what initiated this review, but your paperwork is some of the cleanest I've seen this quarter." That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table, the contract file open in front of me. I reread the severance agreement Marcus had signed. The clauses were clear: no interference, no misrepresentation, no involvement, and yet, he was lurking behind every corner, whispering to anyone who'd listen, trying to light fires he couldn't legally start. I picked up the phone and called David again. "I want to push back," I said, "not just defend. I want to go on the record, file an enforcement motion, show him we're serious." David agreed. He began drafting the notice. "This may scare him into silence," he said, "or it may provoke him. Be ready for both." I said, because at this point, I wasn't acting out of revenge. I was acting out of necessity. He had already taken too much. He wasn't going to take anything else. The motion was filed on a Tuesday. David submitted it personally to the local court, attaching every violation Marcus had committed since signing the severance agreement: misrepresentation, unauthorized contact with suppliers, indirect harassment, all documented, all dated, all supported by witnesses, recordings, and signed correspondence. This wasn't about reclaiming property anymore. It wasn't even about the trust. It was about enforcing a line that Marcus had crossed too many times, and proving that even a mother could reach a limit. By Friday, the court accepted the motion and issued a warning: if Marcus continued, we could pursue a civil injunction. That would mean real consequences. Finis. A permanent public record. Enforcement through law enforcement if necessary. I didn't celebrate. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt tired. That weekend, I stayed home. Not at the motel, not at the temporary rental. I went back to the house. The one Marcus and Lindsay had taken over after Henry's death. the one I had repossessed under the trust. It was still empty, furniture gone, walls stripped bare. The fridge smelled stale. I walked from room to room, not as a visitor, but as the rightful owner. I stood in what used to be Marcus's childhood room. His trophies still sat on a high shelf. Baseball, debate, a middle school science fair ribbon. I didn't take them down. I didn't throw anything away. I just stood there and looked at the space as it was, a shell, a memory without warmth. Downstairs, I opened the file cabinet and pulled out Henry's original company ledger, the handwritten one from the early years. It was thick with time, notes in the margins, ink faded. I ran my fingers over the entries, recalling the names of employees who had come and gone, many of them gone for good now. Then I saw the last page he had written, a single line. If something breaks, rebuild it stronger. It wasn't advice. It wasn't metaphor. It was just Henry, plain, practical, unshaken. On Monday, I returned to the office ready to end it all, not with confrontation, not with drama, but with finality. I had prepared one last letter, not to Marcus, not to Lindsay, but to the court, requesting an extension of the enforcement motion into a permanent injunction, contingent upon any future violations. David reviewed it, approved it, filed it that afternoon. I also instructed our IT manager to scan every single mention of Marcus Adler in our email systems, vendor portals, and file servers. Every remnant of his digital footprint was archived and locked. Then we changed every password. Again, the final step was symbolic, but necessary. I updated the company directory. From the website, I removed the founding family page that used to show Henry, myself, and Marcus. I replaced it with a clean entry, founded in 1979 by Henry and Margaret Adler, now led by Margaret Adler, CEO and trustee of the Adler Family Trust. No legacy photos, no family banners, no curated version of the past, just facts. Marcus didn't respond to the court filing, not officially, but 2 weeks later, a staff member at reception buzzed my office. "There's a delivery for you," she said. No return address. It was a box, plain cardboard, no markings. Inside, wrapped in old newspaper, was a small stack of items. The watch Henry gave Marcus for his college graduation, a set of keys to a car Marcus no longer owned, and a folded note, written in his handwriting, "You got what you wanted. It's all yours now." No signature, no apology, no anger, just 7 cold words. I sat for a moment, then I slid the box under my desk and continued working. There was nothing left to say. The next month passed quietly. Business stabilized. We hired 2 new supervisors. One of the younger clerks, Ellie, was promoted to logistics lead. I started coming in only 3 days a week instead of 5. At home, I restored the house little by little. New paint, new curtains. I brought in the rocking chair from storage, the one Henry had built for me when I was pregnant with Marcus. I placed it near the living room window where the afternoon light hit just right. Not for nostalgia, just comfort. I planted flowers in the front yard. The neighbors waved again. Then one morning, I opened the mailbox and found a postcard. No return address, no writing, just a photo of a lake. I didn't need to ask who sent it. I recognized the handwriting on the recipient line. I threw it away without reading. The final decision from the court came in mid-May. The injunction was granted. If Marcus so much as called a vendor, emailed a staff member, or stepped foot on company property, he would be in violation of a court order. David called me when the confirmation came in. "You did it," he said. "It's over." "I know," I replied. "I felt it this morning." For the first time, I didn't wake up thinking about him. A few weeks later, I invited a small group of staff over to the house for a quiet dinner. Nothing formal, just some pasta, salad, and stories. Don, the driver, brought his wife. Julie brought her teenage daughter. Ellie brought a bottle of wine and a nervous laugh, unsure if it was too much. We ate on the patio, laughed, talked about the company, the summer, even Henry, not as a monument, but as a memory. Before everyone left, Ellie pulled me aside. "I just wanted to say, thank you," she said, "for not giving up on the company, or on us." I looked at her and smiled. "We've all been through something, Ellie, but it's not about what breaks, it's about what we do after." She nodded, teary-eyed, then hugged me quickly before stepping back. That night, I sat in the rocking chair with a cup of tea, listening to the night sounds. I wasn't waiting for anything. I wasn't expecting another letter, another knock, another fight. The house was quiet, and this time, the silence was real, because the door was closed, and I was finally on the other side of it, free.